Hi and welcome. Today I would like to talk about sexuality from a bit of a different angle than many of the topics which we usually as humans refer to when we talk about sexuality. I would like to talk about how sexuality within humans are changing and why sexuality probably will change a lot over the next 2 to 500 to 1,000 years. Probably in a way that it will be unrecognizable. So if I project myself out into the world like 2, 3, 4, 500 years in the future, I would probably not be able to, I might not even be able to recognize sexuality in the way that I understand it today. The reason for this discussion is that for some reason it seems that us humans, we think that sexuality is sort of locked. This is how we create life on Earth. So we just have to accept the way that sexuality functions between humans, because basically it creates lives. And for our future, we need to be able to create life. So for some reason, we have sort of put us into this box that, well, everything is changing and, the sun will eventually die and collapse and Earth itself will die and collapse. But like sexuality won't. It will be constant as it is because it creates life. I don't think this is true at all. Actually, I would say that sexuality is a way to catapult ourselves forward, as well as sexuality is one of the biggest traps for us humans to stall and basically to hinder evolution, both of consciousness and of Earth. And obviously these two are very linked because consciousness is behind matter, so they're deeply intertwined. And to be able to talk more about this, about changes in sexuality and why and etc. I probably need, I have to talk about how I understand life, and I'm being very aware that this is my truth. So all of what I'm saying here in this podcast is my truth and what I have discovered via different channels. It could be scientific evidence, it can be psychology, it could be whatever, but it can also be channeling from my guides, and it can be various bits and pieces I have put together into this patchwork. I've tried to weave it together as beautifully as I can, and now I'm presenting part of it to you because I think it might inspire some of you. I think some of you will be very, very confused about the pressure of sexuality that you feel inside of you and outside of you, of the culture's pressure in different way. And for some of you, it is extremely confusing, and I have a sense that some of you are desperately trying to find pieces, or find a word, or find a language for this aspect of human life, behavior, desire that aren't available, not in the form that I'm trying to give you now. You can find bits and pieces of it, but it's like the pattern underneath I have not seen. So maybe you haven't either. Again, being fully aware that this is my truth. I have absolutely no intention of stuffing my truth down your throat. So it is, you have your free will. So basically what I am now is I am sharing my truth as inspiration. And as is with everything else, this is for you to, be inspired by, resonate with, or just, reject, discard and say, no, I don't buy it and I can't use it, it's not useful for me. So it's just that you know my intentions behind this. My intention is I hope that sharing this information, how I view this and see this, that for some of you it might make it easier to be and live with human sexuality because you understand it better and you understand the complexity of how the human sexuality speaks to you. Because it speaks in different languages, and sometimes they don't seem to be compatible. They sort of pull you in all odds directions. So you can feel quite shattered by the sexual energy. So I hope that adding this framework or offering this framework, that this area in your life might become a little bit easier. So, another thing that I have to add on to this is the understanding that I see Earth evolution and evolution of consciousness as deeply intertwined. So I see development as evolution and involution. So you have evolution, which is your bodily form, that is changing the physiology of man and Earth herself, which is on an evolution course. And that works together with and is paired up with involution, which is basically energies from cosmos, higher frequencies, soul frequencies, you could say, that are coming down. And basically this is a merging of these two forces that actually wants to create a beautiful dance together. And that is happening not outside of us, it is happening through us, in our genetics, in our bodies, and in Earth itself. So I don't see there's any split. I mean, the feeling of being separated from your body, being separated from cosmos, being separated from source is an illusion. It's a very stubborn illusion. And being incarnated on Earth, you live this illusion because you will have some sense of being separate because you have your own body and you are separate from the other bodies. So in that sense, that is a truth. But the feeling that you feel cut off from being in union with life, in union with consciousness, that's the illusion. And that's basically that's the root cause to all the problems that we're experiencing, that we're tumbling around in the shadows, feeling lost. And as I see it, this is a crucial time in humanity's history, because there's been many crucial times in the course of history of Earth and human beings. But as I see this now, which is a very unstable time, it's a beautiful time and a horrific time, and it's a chaotic time. This is basically us cracking open from inside out. And it's pushing everything we have not wanted to see or have not been able to see, it's pushing up to the surface. So whatever darkness we have not been willing to or able to see is being pushed up in ourselves, in others, between us. And it's like, you've had this basement and you have never had a light in there. And like for 20 years or for 1,000 of years, you've just, whenever you had something trash, you threw it down there. And you've never wanted to look at it. The light bulb has not been turned on. And all of a sudden, you find the courage and you find the energy to go down there and you get the lights to work. And in horror, you sort of discover there's shit all over the place. And the other thing that you can end up doing is basically, I need to clean up this shit. And this is basically where we are right now in human development. And it's the beauty in it that cleaning up the shit can make this a really beautiful place. And cleaning up shit is both outside of us. Well, it's not outside of us, but we perceive it as outside of us. The environment, the fresh air, fresh water, etc. I mean, we've been shitting in our own nest. And so that's something we need to clean up. But, and that will, there is a great opportunity that we will actually quite elegantly manage to find ways to quickly clean up the messes of the last thousands and thousands of years. But that really depends. That's a big if. Because it seems that what is leading the way is our internal cleanup. What is this focus on right now for us to be able to see and take care of the way that we trash nature and, we build ugly buildings and we just, we sort of keep making really shitty decisions. For us to change that and clean that up in the outside, in the structures of civilization, etc., in the government, etc., it's really about every single vessel, every single individual cleans up his and her internal mess. And it's not all yours. I mean, lots of ancestral stuff, generation trauma. There's a lot of stuff going on inside. And there's so much tension, hatred, sticky desire with all fantasies. There's so much going on inside of us that we are being forced to look at. So much tension, anxiety, anger, hatred, all the name of it. And basically all of this is being pushed to the surface as well. And it is a boiling pot. And a driver of this, whether you like it or not, is human sexuality. So the way that I understand it is that right now, it's like you cannot turn a blind eye to human sexuality. It's in your face, whether you like it or not. And by that I mean, it's in your face in a way, depending on how you normally, to basically your age, your physical age, your experience, your wisdom, and also your soul age. And by soul age, what I mean by this is basically your higher self, because basically I perceive the evolution and the involution, so there's an influx of higher frequencies that's interluding or connecting with humanity and has been for a long time. I do see that parts, source has split itself out in different rays and split itself out in different souls, and souls have entered matter bodies. And I've been doing this for thousands and thousands of years and have evolved. And some would have this notion in some spiritual circles that it's only Earth that's evolving and it's only the human part that is developing and evolving, that the soul part is always pure and clean and omnipotent. I don't see it this way at all. This is not how I experience it. What I see is that everything is evolving. Yes, consciousness itself is immortal, if you'd like. But all the forms that consciousness from source is shaped into is, source birtheth parts of itself into forms in different dimensions. And all of this is changing in wondrous ways and evolving in a wondrous way, including souls. So, and this makes sense when we talk about soul age. And this is not something that I have, come up with. I have experienced it in my own channeling and my own talking to my own guides, etc., and my own visions. But you also can find others who talk about it. You can find Jose Stevens, who have the Power Path. He has Person Essence System, and he talks about trying to sort of map out or point to soul ages. And there's also Dr. Linda Bachman, who has written 3 or 4 books, I think. And she does regressions, past life regressions, and she's seen this come through again and again and again and again. That for souls, it's just they are just one, light beings that has the same vibration. All of souls, no. They also very different, and they also need to evolve and learn and try out different stuff. And the way that they do this is basically being on Earth or other places in the universe. So knowing this or contemplating about this, that soul ages is a thing, when I found that out, it changed everything for me. Because I really struggled with this part. Because I was like, I've done counseling for years, and this seeing people, it's like, okay, I can see someone who's like 50 years old, but seem to have, the manner of grasping trying to put things together in his or her own life, or trying to figure out how to get out of pain or how to relieve pain, and basically how to be with the life or reflect about life, could be, like a 12-year-old. It seemed that the way that you grow, your body grows, it doesn't always match how well your awareness is utilized in trying to figure out how to navigate life, how to grow, how to take care of yourself and others. There's so many differences. And then I was like, well, is this an error? Is that an error in evolution? And why are some seem to be, they're being pushed by life, they have pain, there's trauma, there's all sorts of things, but they seem to be able to turn it around like alchemy. They take shit and they make gold out of it. Like, why are not everyone able to do this? So what is the fault? Is there something that we can take from these people who are so, yes, they have experienced shit lot of pain, but they're just able to get back on their feet. And I struggled with that, because then it also felt that I was sort of looking at a huge portion of human beings and sort of criticizing them, or feeling that they weren't where they were supposed to be. So I really struggled with that question, until I realized, but hey, if these portions of consciousness that, is what souls are, as I see it, if you go to the mechanics of it, if they also evolve, well, some souls will be here, and basically if they haven't been incarnate on Earth very often, life will be very, very difficult. Life on Earth is extremely dense and extremely difficult. So I thought that was fascinating. And when you couple that with sexuality, it also points to that there are so many ways that a human being can experience sexuality. Can be very, very closed and extremely afraid of it. You can, like debauchery, throw you into it and just, pleasure, and just not get out of it again and just vanish into it and get stuck. You can have a more mature view on sexuality, but also be afraid because you see the potential damage that the darkness, the aggressiveness which is linked to sexuality can cause in human beings. And you can have a beautiful openness that is where it's possible to use sexual energy as transformation, as basically to connect deeper with another human being. So it seems like sexuality is basically a driving force to push evolution and involution as well. Because when you come down to a human body, you cannot really avoid sexuality. You have to. It's such a huge force. So in the conquest about figuring out how to be a human being, remembering that you're also a multidimensional being connected to source and never separated, and you're always loved. Remember that in a human body, and enjoy being in a body with all the sensation and the pleasure that is also available. It's really, really difficult. It's extremely difficult. And we are young. I mean, we're a young species. So both we are young, but we are also stuck. And this is, when I talk to my own guides, what I sense is there's a bit of concern about the stuckness of humans. There is a tendency to get stuck. And it's time, because we're so many people now, and we've pushed the envelope so hard in being self-absorbed, having the head of our own ass. It's really time for us to look a bit higher than getting caught up in fear and desire coupled with fantasy. Because that is itchy thing. It makes us get stuck. So, and the paradox here is that sexuality as a force can either propel you to wake up to who you are, to use a term that's a little bit of a cliche, but it has a lot of truth in it, or it can pull you down. It can if you do not bring awareness into sexuality, it can pull you down and get you even more stuck. So therefore, I would like to talk about some of the different ways that I see that people relate to sexuality today, and maybe you can recognize some of these stages or these areas, and trying to help you to bring in more awareness in that, in your specific journey on Earth and in relation to sexuality, because you will be forced to deal with it one way or the other. And there's not one answer to deal with it. It depends on who you are, your age, and your soul age. It basically it depends on who you are and what you're here to experience, what you're here to transform or uplift or experience, or even maybe dive into the darkness, to figure out how what is this all about. So that in that way, this is not about moral. This is not about what's right and what's wrong, because that's a hopeless discussion. It's basically about you figuring out what resonates with who you are and what you're here to do. And then, get through all the nonsense and all the noise and get to the true core of this. And I hope that this might help you a little bit about sexuality. And before I go into how I see this, sort of how it can play out for you and for different people, depending on where they are and who they are, I would say a bit more how I see that this is why I see that sexuality is even more in your face than it has been before. Because obviously, sexuality has always been a strong force. I mean, regardless of how hard life has been on Earth, hunger, cold, snow, war, whatever, the war between the sexes, rape, all of the aggression and violence, we have kept on banging each other. I mean, human beings have kept, it's like, there's a magnetism that pushes the opposite sex towards each other. And this is basically polarity. I mean, you would have to have polarity as a friction energy to make sure that people would actually have sex and create children, having a life on Earth that is so dualistic. I mean, it's like it's been pushed so far out of feeling separated from source, of feeling so alone and cut off as it's consciously possible without life being unsustainable. I mean, I don't know if you find other places in the universe where it's you have a place with the illusion, with this dense illusion of being separate, and where it's this extreme variation. As right now, it's like on Earth at the same time you have all the variations that has almost been in the lifespan of the planet. I mean, obviously, a lot of the previous human beings before Homo sapiens do not live, they don't exist anymore, but we do find the remains. I mean, dinosaurs do not exist anymore, but we do find the remains. And you can have a small tribal group in some jungle somewhere who have never been exposed to modern life, and you can have the most modern life possible. So you have the whole. It's like what variation have been investigated and lived out on Earth, they are more or less all here at the same time. It's crazy. It's like you have the whole frequency band in form at the same time. I mean, if you're not confused about that, I don't know what. So, and you have to figure out, how do I fit into all of this? And in this polarity, polarity is basically, the result of polarity is a hell of a lot of friction, hell of a lot of the electric energy that sort of, is being created by having two opposite poles. And sexual polarity can be extremely yummy, but it can also be destructive. Polarity also causes war. Polarity causes rape. Polarity is this tenseness that happens between two opposites pole, and that tension, the only thing that sort of makes sure that this tension does not end in violence or destruction is awareness. It's basically awareness. Is it unconscious or is it conscious? Can you use it and keep your consciousness in it? Can you keep open your heart and your mind and your body? Can you keep it open in this tension? Or do you slip down into the shadows where you're unconscious and you start blaming, going to war, beating, basically just reacting through violence because of fear? Basically fear. It could be dominance as well, but dominance, if you work with dominance and you fall down the darkness, it's down there is fear. It's like, if I don't kill you, you kill me. So dominance and is also bounded on fear. So you can see that having sexuality with a lot of the friction that it causes whenever boy meets girl, well, that will jumpstart that something happens. And until now, for the majority of human beings, the sexual force, whatever that catalyzes between people, have merely been unconscious. We say that it's conscious. We say that, I feel my desires and I live them out, and we can talk about sex and I want to have a child. But a lot of it is unconscious. And obviously rape is unconscious. It's not unconscious. Someone allows himself or herself to misuse the sexual energy, but it's still a force that is being used on someone else without permission. So sexuality is both a driving force and a trap. And if you see that in the history of man, well, we have figured out that sexuality is something that can erupt and boil over. And so, the church have tried to put a lid on it. And obviously that failed horribly. You cannot just try and ignore a potent sexual force. It's going to blow up in your face. And obviously it has. Just see priests who are forced not to have sex. Well, that is a bad thing, because the sexual force runs somewhere else and it's being used in dark ways. So that was a shitty plan. We also tried, the hedonistic way, and the whole fertility rituals before the patriarchy is sort of an Pan, and Dionysus, can you sort of see is sort of representative of that. And this is more like, give in to pleasure. Why? You can't force it down anyway, so give in to pleasure. And there's definitely some truth to this, but the point is you can also get trapped in pleasure, because the sexuality itself is never full. It's not something you can tame or that you can satiate. So if you think that if I just give in to pleasure, it will leave me be, I will not feel the craving all the time, you will find out that it is not so. You will get hungry the day after. And if you do this for a long time, you will see that giving into your hunger again and again and again and again without awareness, there will be consequences of that. And this is again not as a judgment, as you are doing a sinful act. This is the way we've interpreted that is nonsense. This is not about anyone outside of you condemning you and saying that you're not allowed to do this. It's basically you will feel that if you misuse the sexual energy, it will take a toll. It will take a toll on your body. It will take a toll on your heart. it will take a toll on your soul. And it will basically not support human evolution. And the reason for that is that right now, if we look at human evolution and evolution of consciousness in a broader perspective, we are not just here, well, we're also here, to live and figure out how to be human and love and have kids and conflict and resolve conflict and all of that. But what's also happening is that everything has its duration, everything has its evolution, and everything has its own span to go through, life, death, rebirth. And for the last couple of years, 2,000-3,000 years, there's been a lot of focus on logic. We've built a lot of society with, math, science, all sorts of stuff. So we've been very mental. We've really worked a lot with the mental body. Now we are more switching over to start cleaning up in the astral body. And the astral body is the highest pitch, the highest frequency is pure desire. There's nothing wrong with desire. Desire is a beautiful, beautiful force, a beautiful frequency. What happens that it gets a bit sticky and everything gets a bit messed up is when desire is sort of coupled with your own, I don't like to say ego because ego is so misunderstood, your own personal fantasies. So your own personal fantasies, when that's coupled with desire, will create suffering. Buddha was very aware of this, and there is truth in this. This does not mean there's anything wrong with desire, and it does not mean there's anything wrong with you having fantasies about things that you would like to explore, because some of this is also basically your soul impulse that's coming through, but sometimes it comes through physiology or a body-mind that might not be able to, well, it reads it out for its current maturity. So, for example, when you are a teenager, you can have a lot of fantasies about, how to be attracted to the opposite sex, the same sex, according to your sexual orientation. And there's a lot of fantasy in that, which is needed because this is what you have. You have fantasy because you lack experience. You haven't had that earth or human experience now in this lifetime. So in this respect, fantasy is a driver for you to go out in the world and try stuff. But the problem is that if you're still linked, if you don't transform your fantasy into, okay, I had a fantasy about this type of woman or man, and you figure out that fantasy and reality, they're very far apart. So you will wake up into knowing eventually that you cannot, it's not about your fantasy and trying to make a person live up to your fantasy. That's going to explode in your face. But you will try. You will try to have a fantasy about a certain person, and that person should live up to your fantasy. And then with maturity, you'll find out, oh, it's the other way around. It's basically me letting go of my fantasy and seeing the person in front of me for who he or she is. This is a natural part of maturity. So in this respect, it's not about it's a good thing or it's a bad thing. It's about you knowing when you're maturing, when you're taking a jump, you could say, or a hop in consciousness or in awareness, and how you know that this is happening in your life, that you're basically taking a leap of maturity, or you're feeling the call. It's like maturity is calling to you. It's time. It's time to grow the fuck up, because it doesn't come like, when you're asleep and someone comes and, kisses your cheek and, really gets you to wake up, in a nice way. No. It's a shitload of cold water you get into your face and a scream, "Grow the fuck up!" This is how maturity speaks to you. And often you will try not to hear it, because sometimes you get stuck in your own immaturity. No, not sometimes, oftentimes you will. We all do. So there's nothing wrong with it. It's not like you're wrong. It's just how it is also to be human. It's when you see your own immaturity, you cannot mature before your awareness tells you, slaps you, screams at you, you're being fucking immature, or your relationships, you're being pushed by the world outside of you, of other people saying you're fucking immature. It's not before something dawns on you to say, well, I really need to I need to grow the fuck up in this area. And sexuality is the best way, I would say, for people to grow up. Unfortunately, it's also one of the places where we allow ourselves to get stuck in the pleasure-pain cycle. Because we mistake sexuality for something that we use it to create children whenever we think that's required, and then we sort of hijack it because we would like to push it, to squeeze it, to squeeze all the sensational pleasure out of it that we can. And of course, again, there's nothing wrong with this. It's just only a small portion of what sexuality is. The highest potential in human sexuality is transformation of darkness. It's like transforming shit into gold. This is basically how you can use sexuality, but you can only use the higher function, the higher frequencies of the sexuality to transform if you use it also with an open heart. And this means that if you have sex with a lot of people just for the pleasure of it, you do not use it to transform anything. It's just a simple fact. So I'm not saying you are wrong if you just want to have sex for the fun of it. This is a natural stage in trying to figure out what human sexuality is. And if you are in an even earlier stage, as a relatively new soul here on earth, and you'll be so scared about human sexuality. It will be overwhelming and you really don't want to have anything to do with it. And then as you mature a little bit, you will get closer to it and you will start, love to try and explore it further. So if you look at it in that context, this is a beautiful thing. It's a beautiful thing that you go out and you just have sex for the experience of it. So it's not a moral thing that it's wrong. It's just, it's a phase. So eventually, either in one life, or you'll do this for many lives, at one point you will, having sex without an open heart and without an open body will no longer make sense to you. And the way that this is conveyed to you is again, it's not in a diplomatic manner. When you change, when you take this leap of maturity, and when this is a possibility for you, it's a possibility for you to take leap of maturity. It doesn't just happen. You have to allow it and you have to work your ass off to do it, to change your patterns, your behavioral patterns, the way you think, the way you act, not the way you feel, but the way you interact with your feelings. When this show up for you, it show up through pain, frustration, anger, numbness. It show up in a way that is not nice at all. And the reason for this is not because you've done something wrong, or you've been bad, or you've been a sinner, or you've been too weak, or whatever you tell yourself. It's nothing to do with that. It's because it makes you wake up. If it isn't uncomfortable, if it isn't painful, if it isn't meaningless, if there's no hope, there's no nothing in this, if you do not feel any of that, you won't change. You will not be aware that there's something that's working through you to change, calling for change through you. And we have this experience that we are human beings with a personality, but the reality is that we are, undying souls, or, cosmic beings that are here to have a human experience. Basically, it's the other way around. So when you wake up to that, or you just raise your gaze a little bit, you will see that evolution works through you. You don't work on evolution, it's the other way around. There are forces that are working through you, whether you like it or not, and much stronger forces in your little personality. And you might not like this. You might hate it, you might think it's annoying, you might think all of it. But nevertheless, the forces of nature, the force of evolution and involution is much stronger than a personal will. So if you can contemplate this and sort of trying to come to grasp with this, that it's working through you, you might realize that it's actually quite beautiful. Even though you might, for a long time, be pretty stubborn and think it's shite. But again, sexuality here is brilliant, because you can't just shut it off. Well, you can. You can. Some of you will be stages where you're not, I don't want to have anything to do with it. It's a mess and it's dark and it's all over the place and I'm fed up. I don't want anything to do with it. And that is fine. You can choose not to have to engage in sexual activity. There's nothing wrong with that. You do not have to use the sexuality as a human being. So let's get that straight first. It's just, if you feel, when I talk about this, if you feel like, now we're coming to the different stages or the different ways of you relating to sexuality. One way of relating to the sexuality for some of you would be, I don't want anything to do with that whatsoever. I don't want to be in relationship. And if I am in a relationship and I do love my partner, but I don't want to have sex, I set him and her free to have sex with others, and we can just take that out of the equation. This is fine. We really live in a time where there is no norm. There is no, I should have sex once a week, or I should have an orgasm this way, or I should be like this for me. It's bullshit. It's absolute bullshit. You have all the variants on Earth at the same time. So basically, it's about figuring out, what is my cosmic play in this? What different tunes are being played through me? And how can I surrender to it? How can I bring my awareness to it so that I know my consciousness, so I know my role to play in this, and I can play it. And while I play this tune, play this archetypic drama through me, it might change. It might change, and then I change with it. This is basically the question you should be asking. The thing I will say is that if you have a sexuality that you really don't want to put to use, meaning I don't want to have sex with anyone, not even with yourself, there are different things that you can investigate, because maybe you are a soul who hasn't been here that many times. Maybe it's your first time on Earth and you're shitless scared of it and you just don't want to have anything to do with it. If that is the way you feel, that you're really scared about it, and you feel that just thinking about, having some enjoyment about your own sexuality in your body, if you're really scared about that and you sort of would like to, if others could just stop talking about sex at all, what you could do, without having any conclusion about where you should end, what you could do was that you could sort to try and get a little bit closer to sexuality in yourself. If it's overwhelming and you don't even want to explore it with yourself, start with yourself, because starting with to have sex with other people, if this is how you feel, and you feel so new and it's you don't know what to do with it, start with yourself. And this is basically being self-care and self-love for your body. And you can start being comfortable with touching yourself and enjoying your own caresses and see where that takes you. So if you feel that this whole thing about being a sexual being is just too much, and you really don't want to dive into it, you can take it in very small steps. So if you're completely close to it, the You can decide to stay that way, or you could try and take that energy that is very potent right now because the sexuality is in your face. Because basically we're trying to clean up the astral layers. We're basically trying to, and that's probably going to be for the next, 1,000 years, 2,000 years, I don't know. I don't have a clue how long that's going to take. But because the astral so much, every time a human being has a desire, and that is coupled with a fantasy, and that fantasy gets stuck, meaning it could be a young man. I have a fantasy about a particular woman I want to have sex with who looks like this. And then he masturbates to this woman again and again and again and again. But there's nothing born from it. He doesn't meet a woman that looks like the fantasy, so the fantasy actually merges with reality. And he creates all sorts of variants. All sorts of, yes, this is a woman and I have sex with her and it was nice. And we also, we can open our hearts together. We can go to groceries together. We can shop groceries. We can drink coffee. We can have an argument. Out of that fantasy, something is born. Whenever you have a fantasy about other person, it could also be a woman who has a fantasy about having children with a man, and she doesn't have a man or children, so she has the same fantasy again and again and again and again and again. She wants to give birth to this, but it is not born. She does not take a decision. Either I have a child myself, I find a man and we get children together, or I adopt, or I take the power, I take the force that I would have used to create this child and I raise it into my awareness and I use this force and I create something else in the world. If she doesn't do that and he doesn't do that but keeps on living in fantasy land, all of these fantasies, they get layered in the astral body, in the collective astral body, and they pollute it. Now, some of you might say, oh no, I have fantasies all the time. Am I wrong? Is this wrong? And again, this is not something morally. I'm not pointing fingers of anyone. It's very natural. I'm not going to use the name natural. Human beings, in a way of exploring sexuality, will end up in fantasy land all the time because we have been conditioned and we end up, it's dealing with desire. It's not even conditioning. Dealing with desire is extremely difficult. So when we deal with desire, basically the teachings are how we should go about it. If we want to work with it, if you're called to work with it in maturity, it's basically how can you play with desire, the fire in desire, without adding fantasy? How can you actually, use desire to go out and fucking create what you desire. Make it real, make it into reality. So if you desire having a child, well, go for it. Find someone to create a child with and do it. If you have a desire for a specific woman she looks like this and she's out of my league, well, you gotta, man up and see if you can create her. Not create her, but create the physical meeting with her. Because fantasies are so easy to slip into. You can spend your whole life in fantasy and not create anything with your power, with your force on earth. And then it creates two things. You get stuck because basically you don't go out into the world and live, which is basically what the soul wants to and the body wants to. But the other thing is not by intention, you don't do this intentionally, but it will have the negative effect on the astral body that it will pollute it. All of these fantasies, it's like when you put clutter, when you have cluttering in the oceans, the plastic in the oceans, it's the same thing. You're basically leaving parts of your energy, your sexual energy, you're sort of, throwing it in the corners because you're not having awareness of it. You're just, throwing it around. And it's just a fact that all we humans do this a lot. Right now, porn is I think it's the biggest industry. It's the biggest money, it's the biggest industry. So every time someone masturbates to porn, it ends up polluting in the astral layer. And I know I'm not saying this to judge any of you or myself. I myself have had years where I have explored a lot of fantasies. I'm just saying that this is human behavior. And eventually, this is where I see sexuality is changing. We will have to clean up. We'll have to clean up the air, we'll have to clean up the water, we'll have to clean up, our capitalistic money system. We'll have to clean up how we treat each other in workplaces. We'll have to clean up how we treat each other in groups. We'll have to clean up, nature. We'll also have to clean up our sexual energy, because we are just, it's all over the place. It's scattered all over the place in energy leaks. Basically, energy. You sort of throw something in your astral layer and it just sits there and gets all sticky. And I mean, again, in one way, this whole thing that we now, especially, well, now I live in Denmark, but so if you go to someone and talk about sexuality, a therapist, it's okay to talk about your fantasies. It's okay to have an openness about all the forces that come up via sex with the sexual energy. And this is a good thing. So I'm not saying that fantasies are bad and we shouldn't talk about it, because that was the past. That was when there was so much repressed darkness in the sexuality that we were not allowed to talk about or acknowledge was there. That was a shitty time. I mean, it was a shitty deal, a deal with the devil, because that just made it worse. So that we now are able to talk, and you can talk about your fantasies. You can actually explore your fantasies. You can explore the dark parts of you, and often it's not you. It's basically just your ancestors, and it's the genetics of a bumpy ride through evolution. All of that is a good thing. Again, it's a matter of frequency. It's a matter of awareness. Where are you when you're opening up? In the beginning, where you're opening up into your sexuality, you begin to understand the potent power. You begin to understand the darkness that is hidden in it and is also hidden in you and your sexual partner. And you try to get close to this darkness by, allowing it, breathing into it, loving it. It's allowed to be there. We are no longer rejecting it. It's a good thing, and it was a necessary step for us. But now you can get stuck in this phase. You can get stuck in the sense that you get so captivated by the fantasy in it. It's so thrilling. It almost hypnotizes you. So if you in this stage get identified with the fantasies and all the different role playing and all the different kinks you can play out sexually. I mean, it's like, yes, deep in, explore, go almost so deep that you disappear and explore everything within a safe container, and people who explore this level of darkness, keep your awareness in it so it doesn't become violent, but it's just this edge. Please do so in a environment with a loving partner, in swinging where it's firm boundaries and everyone's looked after, etc. I mean, you can do all of this, a tantra, whatever, and there's so various ways of exploring this. Just be aware of one point. Maturity will call you again. This is a phase, it is a stage. This is not free sexuality. This is not where we are meant to sleep in our laurels, I believe it's called, or we're supposed to stop growing, because this is not where sexuality will end. This is not a sign that we have freed ourselves and freed sexuality as a life force that is fully conscious. It is just a phase. Because then you will start noticing that you feel a victim of your own fantasies. At one point, the niceness and the juiciness and the freedom in feeling that, I can explore this, and I don't have to, there's no taboo about this, and I can talk about this, and I can explore this, and all the freedom, that beautiful, wonderful. But at one point, you will start probably by either getting obsessed, and you need to masturbate all the time or have sex all the time, and it will be difficult for your relationships, because it's like, you will think about the men or the women all the time. So you basically see that you have slipped into using the sexual energy as a way to release stress or tension, or to get excitement and adventure into your life. and that is addictive. So you basically use the capability for transformation is not being utilized, so you're using it, you not on purpose, but it's hijacked your system in a way that you have to have sex in a certain amount, in a certain way, for you to feel content in your body. It's like there is a tension that builds up, and this has to be relieved in this way. And fetish, different kinds of fetish, sexual fetishes are built up in this way. Just be aware that this is a pitfall. This is the way that you can end up. So throwing yourself out, like just suppressing the sexuality, is going to blow up in your face. So that's not a good idea. But throwing yourself out in the pleasure and just letting all go and disappearing in it, without stepping out of it from time to time and let me just pull myself out of it and not really masturbating and just leaving it be, that can be a pitfall where you disappear in it, and it can be compulsive and addictive, and you will have to have certain, and it could be I'll have to go to certain parties, I will have to have sex in a specific way, even so I have to try and force my partner to do it, or I'll have to go out and find others to do it, because if I don't get it that way, I don't feel satisfied. So basically, and this is interesting, when you are in the starting period of exploring fantasies and opening up, and it's a bit forbidden, and you realize that you have closures on sexuality, and you start to open up, and it's beautiful, and all of this, and it's interesting, and it's fun, and it's thrilling, and it has all of it. At one point, you will start to close down in a new way if you don't take the maturity hop, the next level, if you like, in sexuality that is speaking through you. And the way that you know that it's speaking through you is because now you're so fixated on having sex in specific manners or in specific quantities that it almost all consumes you, or that it starts ruining your relationship, that it's very difficult to have a relationship to one partner because you will have to have him or her be sexual in a specific way, and he or she might not enjoy that or don't want to play along, or that you have to have more people, you have to have more sexual partners to be able to live out your fantasies, to get the form of fulfillment or the form of release. And maybe your partner is not, it put a strain on your relationship in a way that, or, in other ways, it gets difficult. You're going to lose a hell of a lot of life energy on this, having sex all the time. And at one point you might ask yourself, what am I actually creating here? And the truth is, you're not creating anything. You're using sex as an escape from probably something in your life that you don't want to look at, that you find is boring. So you seek adventure, or you seek release, or you seek to be seen, or you seek to be met. So at one point you will see that sex can and will be used to escape pain by trying to add a certain nuance of pleasure, however you see it. And when you wake up to that, you have a choice. You can either bury that maturity called very deep in you and say, no, I'm just going to continue, and throw yourself out in the same ways I've had sex that has narrowed you into, I only can have sex in this way and this quantity, and I need to do it in this way, and blah, blah, blah. You can do that. You have free will to do that. Or you can listen to the call, and you can try to let the new awareness and the new level of sexuality speak through you, and see how that is being birthed through you. So again, there's no judgment. There's no judgment on anything that you do. It's just more to point out that what I see is that when someone is having a maturity call related to sexuality and they don't follow it, it typically creates havoc, pain and suffering and numbness. And that could be either, the body, you need to force your body to have sex, you need Viagra, you need everything else. Or for women, it can be all of a sudden your body just shuts down completely. Or you have to have, it's very difficult for you to feel anything else than sexual arousal. And you use that whenever you have pent up, also for the emotional stuff. So you can get to use sex as a bypass for emotional maturity. And that will basically mean that it will become more and more difficult to relate to you in relationships. Because the only way that we can create a loving and kind and respectful relationship is via emotional maturity. So you can bypass emotional maturity by using your sexual energy to relieve tension via orgasm. There's nothing wrong. Orgasm is lovely and nice, and there's nothing wrong with having orgasms. But if you are using orgasms to try to avoid to take responsibility for your emotional life, it will really make your life complicated and difficult. Because the sexual energy is not supposed for you to use to bypass stuff. The sexual energy can be extremely potent to bring awareness into something that's very difficult, so you can transform it via the sexual energy. But this is completely different. So it's just to say that basically the answer to this time, where you probably will find that your sexuality is much more in your face than some of you would like. Some of you love it because you're so curious for this sexual force, and it's like, oh, this is beautiful and this is great and I love it. We are in a timeline where certain places in the world that are much more open. We don't have an open sexuality. We're on the way, but some areas on the planet are more open than they have been. So it's more safe to experiment and find others who like to experiment with you. So you'll also see this going on. And for you, it's say, well, yes, enjoy that it feels like your time. I mean, really enjoy that and explore it in any way that you feel that it's being birthed through you. For some of you, you might, and especially if you're if you're open, I would say if you have, you've contact your higher self, you see yourself as spiritual and open, and maybe to channeling, whatever. And this is natural for you. This is sort of who you are. This is a natural thing for you to experience yourself as having a soul, and the cosmos is alive and vibrating and speaking through us. Then you might have had insights or intuitions or visions about goddess rites, fertility rites, and temples were a way of honoring the feminine was being performed via sexual ecstasy. And this is why I think we see more and more about, for some of you who is inspired by this and see this, it will come through to you, and it's like you'll wish to dive into the way we can use sexual energy to initiate, and also to explore the feminine and the return of the feminine, because the feminine for a woman, into opening up her body, is also sexual ecstasy. So there is a deep link for women with sexual energy and spirituality and openness and her spirituality. So it's all interconnected. For you, what I see about this, it's a beautiful thing. It's a beautiful thing that, especially via women, that we sort of sense the strength and the power and the juiciness, and there's so much power in our heart, in the sacral chakra, our womb, and then we reconnect with that, and we share this knowledge, and we remember that there was a time on earth when the goddess, the feminine, was honored, and she was honored via the female body, and it was a beautiful thing. And also via sex, it was actually perceived as something sacred, and to remember that is beautiful and healing. So if you feel this come through you, explore it in depth, really explore it, and you might remember ways to initiate the masculine into the heart, because this is what we have forgotten. It is true that the masculine is capable of helping the feminine open up, or we are helping the woman open up and to surrender. This is true. But what we have forgotten that is so beautiful and sacred is that it is the feminine who initiate the masculine into the heart. So basically, in a lot of ways, it is the woman who initiates the man into the higher realms of the sexual force, the sexual power, into the ecstasy, and into the heart, and into his own spirituality. And this has been forgotten, and it was so close to being lost, this wisdom. And now this is again beginning to sort of seep into the collective consciousness, which is a beautiful, beautiful thing. There is one thing, because this also has a pitfall, not a downfall, but a sort of a trap to be aware of, which I tend to see a lot, and I understand the reason why, is that when you feel this and you sort of sense the way this was expressed, these fertility rites, how the energy behind them, it's intoxicating, beautiful, and ecstatic, and sexy. So sometimes I see this era in the human development, which was, it's like 4,000 years ago probably. And then they existed for a long time before the patriarchy. Basically in conjunction with the sacredness of the goddess, that then more or less went underground. Well, especially within sort of in Christianity, because there was only a few aspects of the goddess that was, put into the Bible. It was Mother Mary. It was sort of Maria Magdalene was considered a whore, a prostitute, which is not true. So it was like when the patriarchy arrived, it was only certain parts of the feminine that were allowed to be seen, that were seen. And now the masculine has been, taking his maturity leap, and now the feminine has returned, because basically now it's about balance. This time frame we're in right now is about balance between the masculine and the feminine. And to bring back that balance, it is extremely important to remember the wisdom that she initiate him in ecstasy. And she remembers how the sexual energy is transformative. And to remember this, she needs to retake her power, her womb power, basically. And therefore, the sexuality for her is important. And for her to reclaim her sexuality, she does not need to have sex with a man to reclaim her sexuality. This is very important for all women to know. You can fully reclaim your sexuality and then decide what you're going to do with it. But the same thing is true, that if your sexuality leaks in all sorts of ways, in fantasies about another man, another child, and you're not doing anything about it. There's nothing wrong if you want to create a child. Just bring it into awareness and put an action plan in place. It's like, well, you have a man, do you want to have a child with him? And you're like, no, I don't want to, so I'm going to fantasize about it. If you really want to have another child, you'll have to leave that relationship and go and find a man who you can, in love, create a child with. Because this is the real issue about fantasy, and why it's linked to immaturity for both men and women. When we go and fantasize, but we do not take responsibility for the fantasy and birthing it into reality, it's a major energy leak that first of all pollute the astral plane, but also it keeps you stuck. Because if you fantasize about another life with another man, but you don't do anything about it, you are not loving the husband you're with, or the man you're with, or the partner you're with. And if you are alone and you long for someone who's not there, well, you're not taking the steps going out into the world and seeing if, well, here I am. Do you want to take a dance with me? Yes, it will be painful. You do not throw yourself into life. You withdraw into fantasy. And it's the same with porn. I mean, also women see porn, but men see a lot more porn than women. So because they're very visual. So for men, they can disappear in a fantasy porn world. They never get rejected by a woman, because as soon as they've masturbated to one woman, they can just find another to masturbate. But it's not real. They are not out there, putting themselves out there. Can I co-create with another being who has an opposite sex? So that's a real issue with fantasy. It doesn't birth anything. It doesn't create anything unless you use the fantasy to be aware of the discrepancies in your life, your pain. I want a nourishing relation. I want a loving relation. I do not have that. How do I create that? How do I find someone to co-create that with? It's because you don't have the guts to do it. Because you're afraid. And it's okay. It's okay that you're afraid. But at least admit that you're afraid. Because always returning to the fantasy will just, you will not do anything different in your life if you just disappear into fantasy. So right now, basically, for the astral plane to get cleansed up or cleaned up, eventually that will collapse. I mean, in thousands of years, because every form will collapse. The sun will disappear, planet will disappear, human beings as we understand it will disappear, and sexuality will disappear as well. I mean, sexuality as we know it is dying. Right now we need the intense pressure because we need to clean up all of these thousands of years of fantasy related to sexuality, because it has not been used. Only a small proportion of human beings have used the sexual energy as transformation, which it's supposed to be used for. Transformation, either you take the energy and you create a child, or you take it and you create something different. You create darkness, you take darkness and you turn it into light, you turn it into gold. But consciously, having your awareness in it, this is what is possible with sexuality. So right now, basically, what is now going on is that the astral plane needs to be cleaned up. And this is basically when the last fantasy has been risen up or sort of cleansed up or cleaned. So it is just bright, pure desire. Then the astral plane, the astral body, will collapse. And something different of all of that energy, it will collapse and it will die and it will be reborn in another shape and form that we shouldn't know. It's a mystery, because everything that dies is turned into something else. Whatever is left over, either from the body that's being buried and it goes to the earth and the ground, or in the psyche that a behavior or a pattern dies, and the friction and the energy that was used to holding that in place is being used to be more joyful, more creating the life you want. So this is why it's so crucial to understand that sexuality pushes you to the fucking limit the whole time. And you can either take the calling, bring awareness into it with yourself and together with others, and use that friction, use that energy just to create something in your life, to create something in the world. Or you can let yourself being pulled down in dull fantasy land where you have to have the same fantasy again and again to get off. When I clean up the astral layers and I work on this specific area, when I see what it does to have that, you have a lot of friction in the polarity, the sexual polarity, have a lot of friction, but you contain it in a very, very tight framed fantasy. It's a construct. And you have such a high energy that is so fiery, it's so burning, because transformation energy needs to be fucking burning. It needs to burn away shit. Like the phoenix, it burns and something is created. To see the tighter the role play, the tighter the S&M, the tighter the fantasy, the tighter that it has to be played out to sort of use the ecstasy to channel in a specific way, the more narrow this goes. But then you pump in and you try to do whatever you can with toys and I don't know. You can add so much stuff in this world, virtual reality, all sorts of porn. You get all sort of variants to try and hijack this. You get more and more and more energy pumped into this. When I clean up this on an energetic level, it's burned off. It's like you look into a computer that's completely, you have the motherboard, it's just like poof. It's dark, it's smelly, it's crusty, it's not creation. It is not creation. And again, this is not to judge that we do this, that this is happening, that human beings do this because they try so desperately to use pleasure to get away from pain. I understand that. I do understand so much pain in a human body on Earth, still, where we are in this timeline. So I get it. It's just that it doesn't work. It will not ease your pain. It will just give you the illusion that it will ease your pain. And then further down the road, the pain will blow up in your face. So I think what I'm trying to inspire you to is not to have a judgment and not to have a moral insight about where you are and how you explore sexuality, because it's all good in the hood. It's all good. But more to be aware when you feel the calling that something in the way that you approach your sexuality, in the way you live out your sexuality, in the way that you understand sexuality. Something is knocking inside of you, telling you that it's time to raise your awareness, to understand it from a different perspective. I would invite you to follow that, because that will ease the pain. It will not just ease the pain, it will transform the pain. Yes, there are more pain layers in it, true, because every time you expand your consciousness and open your heart, it's painful. But every time you dare to do that, and you open your perspective and your understanding, and you use it as a driving force, that will bring in more joy. It will bring in more ecstasy. It will ease the numbness. It will create heaven on earth. Heaven on earth is not no pain. That's not true. Heaven on earth is living a life where the way that pain show up is meaningful, because you understand why it is here. And you can work with it, and you can transform the pain into gold, which is compassion, open heart, ecstasy. So all different sorts, also all different frequencies. And sexuality is in that way our biggest mentor. It is playing with us, and it is playing with fire. So in one way you could say that the sexual force is kind of ruthless, and you can get burnt, and you can go under and get stuck, and you can get addicted, and you can get all sorts. So it's a dangerous game. But that's why we seek it as well, because in that awareness that we are getting close to a threshold, to an edge, that it's that brink where, the light meets the darkness and the darkness meets the light. It is exactly that point. That is where sexuality lies. So we also seek it, but we seek it because we want to transform, because we need friction to evolve. We need friction to evolve, otherwise we would do nothing. So basically, this is why this time right now, this time frame, which is about trying to find balance in things. It's not black or white, good and bad. It's the balance. Because when you get too far out, either ignoring or suppressing sexuality is going to blow up. If you disappear in it and get stuck in ways that you want to control ecstasy, you want to control the narrative, you want to control the fantasy, it's going to blow up. It's going to blow up in ways that are going to be utterly painful. So use the pain. I would say use the pain as a mentor, as a guide to bring in awareness. And this, again, it's not about you have done missteps, I've taken the wrong decisions, I've done anything wrong. Because we need to go to the edge and get hurt a little bit to wake up and to say, wow, okay, got this experience now, what now to do? It's all good. I would just really advise you to bring in awareness, especially about the sexual force that has always been extremely present, but right now it's just like it is in your face. So you have to deal with it, I would say. And I see it a lot in relationships. And this, I think we're going to see all sorts of ways that it breaks up this way of thinking that, you have a couple and then they get married and then they have sex and they lived and, they died and they lived a happy life and then they died. This is not how it's working. You can have a partner and you can keep on rejuvenating the sexual energy between you, but you can only use polarity in your life consciously if you allow death. Otherwise you cannot. It will get stale, it will get empty, it will get the same, because you've locked into ways that this is how we usually get orgasm and this is how we're going to do it. And then with the years, it's going to get boring. Everyone experiences this. This doesn't mean that you can travel with one partner and then you can keep exploring the sexuality, because you can. But you have to be brave. If that is the path for you, you have to be very brave, and you have to allow death. You have to feel that in you, when you feel this way of relating sexually to myself and to the other, it's no longer working for me. And you have to not take it personally, and he or she has to not take it personally. And when you do take it personally, you have to be together and grieve and be in those emotions and land them. Because sexuality is such a trigger as well. It triggers all sorts of stuff. So it is trickery. It is difficult. And you will see different ways of dealing with it. You will see, a couple where, the sex life is no longer, they don't enjoy each other as much, it's getting boring, and then they agree to go out and find either their own relationship, or they go to swinger. So this is a possibility, and this will give some benefits, and then this can give you a lot of experience, and it can sort of give you you can explore sexuality more in depth, and it can give you a lot of insights to your own and other sexuality. Just be aware that it might also capture you and lock you into certain ways of relieving pressure, and that can get addictive. So there is also a possibility of waking up in that. Or, if you don't have the guts to be truthful to your partner about all the things that are lurking inside of you, you can go out and be together with others, and eventually he or she will find out, or you have such a bad conscience that he or she will find out, or you make someone other pregnant, or you get a disease. So in some way, the cat will always get out of the bag. So eventually you will have to admit that you didn't have the guts to come clean. You didn't have the guts to face your sexuality and the fact that you weren't satisfied in your current relationship, or that you just wanted something different, but you weren't going to tell him or her because you thought he or she might not accept it, and therefore he or she would leave you. You have to have the guts to be truthful, to be transparent. If there's something you want sexually and your partner do not want to play along with you, you have to decide, is this so important for me to go and explore that I might risk my relationship? And if the answer is yes, then go and do it. But be truthful. So whether you like it or not, sexuality, it pushes you to the limit. Also about being truthful about accepting and standing up for who you are, but also accepting that the other might not be the same or want the same, and you cannot force the other one to have sex in a way that you want to, because the other has a free will as well. So you're never obliged to give each other sexual pleasure. It's not a bargain. It's a gift you can offer each other. So in this way, right now, sexuality have always been like this, but right now, it's really in your face. And I think some of you might recognize this. And it's been a huge topic. It is a huge topic. And basically what I would like to state today is, for some of you are in the area that you sort of would like to open up a bit more and be a bit more explorative, and perhaps, work with whatever trauma you have about sexuality, or, talk about sexual fantasies, etc. There's so many people who work with sexuality, for example, in Denmark right now, that there's a lot of people you can go to through these stages. A lot of books about either swinging or polyamory or open relationships, if that's something you're going to explore. So in these areas, my expertise, you could find this information other places that much more have studied this and worked with this and lived it out much more than I have. So if what I have said today, what I've sort of put together, because the thing that has been most on my mind and on my heart and on my soul that she put forth is the astonishing transformative potential that lies within the sexual energy itself, and the connectedness to women reclaiming their power and reclaiming their sexuality. Basically, not even reclaiming it, they're basically discovering it from scratch, recreating their sexuality, and offering this as a gift, as a precious gift, to their chosen partner who longs to be initiated into ecstasy. This is where I come into the picture. So if this speaks to you, and if it makes sense to you that maybe you have, you've explored everything you could, different scenarios and swinging. You tried it all. Maybe you've been jumped in and tried it all, and you have discovered that the backside of exploring it all is that you feel a bit limited. You feel there is more to explore, but going into these various settings and do the same role plays or do the same. It's like you've tried it, and it's like, how can I explore this deeper? I don't know how. This is because you sort of outlived that way of exploring. It's been very horizontal. So now you have a calling about going vertical and opening up via transformation and ecstasy. And this also means being with whatever pain and darkness comes up in either you or your partner. And this journey, if you choose this way of working with your sexuality and the sexual energy, right now you will have to work with one person. So if you feel this calling and you sort of tried it all, you tried the group fuck, you've tried open relationship, you've tried polyamory, you've tried swing, you've done it all, and you can feel there is more, then there is a calling to open up. And it's not because there per se have to just be one. Maybe in the future, maybe you can do it with more. The reason right now that it has to be one chosen partner is because this journey is related to opening up your heart, and it's related to opening up in ways you cannot imagine. And this is so vulnerable. There's so much darkness, so much pain and suffering that comes up in the process that can be transformed into ecstasy. And having more people in that mix will confuse it, because we all have different portion of darkness, and you will get disturbed. I simply cannot see you will be able to walk the path with more than one at this time. So if this calls to you, you would have to sacrifice your fantasies with many and your actual sexual enjoyment with many for the sake of choosing one to open up. And this is an universal truth. Whenever you feel the calling, the maturity call comes through you, and you adhere to it, you don't twist down, you adhere to it, and you say, yes, I am committed to go to the next level, take on the brighter consciousness, being aware of where I have been immature, where I have been unconscious. There are sacrifices to be made. You cannot and will not move to any next level without sacrificing either relationships that's outlived, behavioral patterns, convictions, emotional reactions, limited beliefs. There will be a sacrifice. So you have to be willing to take that risk. And there can be some sort of, maybe sometimes we humans can be very immature and we think we can have it all. And this is basically when we think I can have, the nurturing relationship to my partner, and I can also go out and have sex with others without telling. You can't. It will blow up. So I think when we talk about maturity, this is extremely important, because there's sometimes a part of the human nature does not like the sacrifice part. But it's no different than if you really want to have a really nice job with nice money. Well, you have to work your ass off one way or the other. If you want to be able to do a triathlon or Ironman or whatever, you'll have to train. You'll have to stop eating chips every day. There is a sacrifice. This is the same thing. If you want to dive in and meeting and living the human sexuality and until it burns out, like the sun, the desire in human sexuality is going to burn out. So if you want to ride that wave and burn out with it, with being aware, bringing your awareness into it, well, there's going to be sacrifices. But it is possible. It is a choice that you can make. So it's about your intention. It's really important when it comes to human sexuality that you find out, what is my intention? What am I going to do with this? And then you throw yourself into that intention and you ride it until it burns out and it's time for a new intention. And hey, like the sun eventually is going to burn out. Not in my and your lifetime, but eventually our ancestors, our future generations, at one point it will. Because every form ends. And sexuality is no different. So at least what we can do is go out with a bang and use the tension, use the fire, and bring all the awareness into it that we can. And create as much beauty and love and take as much shit and shadow and darkness and turn it into gold. It is possible. So if that speaks to you, if that part of exploring sexuality speaks to you and it resonates with you, you're always welcome to reach out and we can look into it. Thanks. I think it was all I would say for today. Thanks. Bye.